please? Okay. Oh. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order our meeting for Tuesday, April 2nd for 9 a.m. I'm going to pass it over to CAO to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I would like to acknowledge that I am an ally of Indigenous peoples. The township of Lucan Biddulph is located on the treaty and traditional territory and ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples and is covered by several Upper Canada treaties. We recognize and celebrate the contributions of Indigenous communities and our shared cultural heritage. Lucan Biddulph is now home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and communities that have a unique relationship with the land and its resources and continue to shape the history and the economy of the township. We recognize the unique role Indigenous communities have in the development of our communities. The contribution from Indigenous communities ensure the sharing of unique perspectives and traditional knowledge. The township recognizes the importance of consulting with our Indigenous neighbors and communities in an effort to build constructive, cooperative relationships throughout meaningful engagement to inform our decision-making and build partnerships. We acknowledge historic and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we affirm our commitment to honoring Indigenous voices, nations, and cultures, and to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect.
Thank you, Ron. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in each of thereof? Okay, seeing none. Announcements, just one announcement. I just want to acknowledge the newly formed under 21 team from Lucan won the All Ontario in Kingston over the weekend. So a little shout out to them. Congratulations. There is no closed session, public meeting. We do have a delegation today from Aqua, and we have Susan, Renee, and Cindy here today from Aqua. So welcome, and I'll let you do your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Cindy Sigurdsson. I'm the Safety Process and Compliance Manager with the Ontario Clean Water Agency. I'm here to present the 2023 annual performance reports for the Lucan Wastewater Treatment Plant and Granton Wastewater Treatment Plant, along with the collection systems. Both of these reports are required for the environmental compliance approvals and the newly formed consolidated linear infrastructure environmental compliance approval for the collection systems. So Aqua operates the wastewater treatment plants and sewage pumping stations, and the collection system, the sewer systems, are operated by the township of Lucan Biddulph. The portion that is operated by Lucan Biddulph is of the annual report is identified within Appendix A. Both sewage treatment plants did perform very well in 2023 with no limit exceedances. There were several objective exceedances, but these were managed in order to prevent the limit exceedances from occurring. Within Lucan, the majority of the objective exceedances were for pH, which is something that occurs frequently when we're trying to manage the phosphorus removal. By adding alum, it lowers the pH of the effluent. In Granton, we have ongoing struggles with suspended solids within the effluent, and this is due to limitations within our chemical dosing systems, the clarifiers, and the filter system. However, in 2023, the amount of objective exceedances was significantly reduced in 2023. These annual performance reports also identified maintenance activities that have occurred within the systems. Aqua utilizes a workplace management system known as Maximo to conduct any preventative maintenance on equipment in the systems. There are recommendations for this year in order to maintain the plants for high quality effluent that is produced. There were no spills or overflows in either systems. There was one bypass of the system. This occurred at the Granton facility when there was a power fail and the generator failed to start. So there was a brief bypass where UV disinfection wasn't maintained, and this was reported to the ministry as a non-compliance. So Lucan is currently at 83% rated capacity, whereas Granton is at 41%. Whenever we're outside of the rated capacity, above the rated capacity, we have to take additional samples to ensure that the effluent quality is maintained. And this was conducted in Lucan quite a few times, but the effluent quality was maintained. So that's all for these annual reports. If you have any questions, please let me know, or if you want to send questions later, I can certainly provide a response.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll look out to my counselors here for questions. Go ahead, Councillor Reagan.
If I may, Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you for the report. I just had one report that I was looking at was the Lucan Biddulph wastewater system report, fourth quarter. And just as you get into the compliance summary, there's two sections. I think you mentioned one, the Lucan clarifier failure and the Granton wastewater bypass event failure. I guess the first one kind of concerns me. It just says that an operator found the Lucan clarifier inoperable. And I'm just wondering, that's just kind of concerning to the layperson that it was just found, like somebody it sounded like it was a random discovery. Is there an alarm system, or if I don't know if I'm overreacting to it. It's just, when I read it, it just seemed to me like it wasn't working and there was no alarm system, and it was like like what could have happened if it wasn't found. And I guess the second one was the bypass event. And it said that the backup power supply failed as well. Is there alarm systems for that as well? Again, just a concern to the layperson, to a resident that just doesn't know the system.
Sure, I'll answer that for you. So the Lucan clarifier failure, there are no alarms for that failure, unfortunately, but it's not that big of a concern because we have a shear pin that gives way before there's a catastrophic failure. So there's no excuse me, there's no alarms required for that, and it wouldn't catch it anyway. So we just do some maintenance and repair it, and then everything operates normally again. So as for the Granton wastewater bypass event, that was a temporary loss related. It had just been transferred over to a new system. The generator was put outside, and it got too warm in the building. So that's been since corrected, and we don't anticipate any other failures.
All right. Okay. Again, thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. No, it's just as a resident who doesn't know it. I mean, I've been there several times and I've had the tour a number of times, but just when you read things like that, it's a bit concerning, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, through you. Thanks for the annual reports. Lots of information in there, and it's well presented. I wanted to ask about the engineer's assessment that because there was those 43 days where it was in excess of the rated capacity, so we have to do those additional samples. But I guess there was an assessment done, and now so it was increased to 3,600 cubic meters per day for that. So just more information about that and what that assessment was and how it determined different value.
Yeah, BM Ross provided the assessment. So just on the ECA, it identifies the rated capacity of the entire plant. But BM Ross was looking at the secondary treatment, so the aeration system, and identified that that system can handle 3,600 cubic meters per day. And so that's where we have utilized that value for the rated capacity of when the aeration tanks. There still is capacity within like a rated capacity for the UV system. So if there was certain components taken out of service, we'd have to meet those flows. But yeah, just the aeration system was re-rated at 3,600, but the overall capacity of the plant is still 1,700 on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you. Another question I had, I guess focusing on the lack of sludge storage space at the Lucan facility. And we had that emergency sludge haul in February to take sludge to the lagoon. And so my question is, when sludge goes to the lagoon, how often is that removed? And do we know the quantity of the sludge within the lagoon, or just what happens with that sludge?
So I guess just for the information, there is an application into the ministry to utilize that lagoon as a sludge storage lagoon. So that's why we were allowed to offload into the lagoon system as an emergency until that approval may or may not be accepted. We do monitoring of the lagoon sludge levels. To my knowledge, it hasn't been dredged in some time and won't require any dredging at this time.
Thank you. I guess my last question was for the Granton facility. It just seems like there's quite a bit of sludge generated there. It was 880 cubic meters, which seems quite high compared to the Lucan facility because it has such a larger population in Lucan. So just is that normal that the sludge quantity is that high in Granton? Is it because it's a different process?
Yeah, so in the Granton facility, the sludge is contained within the rotating biological contactor basin. And in order to meet the performance limits with TSS, so the suspended solids, we have recognized that removing the sludge more often helps with the suspended solids in the effluent. So we're hauling quite often. And just due to the nature of it, it's within the basin, so you're collecting a lot of water as well as the solids. So that's why the quantity is more, because it has a higher water content to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other further questions? Councillor Westman, go ahead.
Yeah, to the layman's ear, capacity, I've had people ask me about Lucan's capacity being so high. We're at a higher usage right now. What does that mean in total numbers? Like, we're at 80, what was it, 83?
Yes,
Yeah.
83%.
So I've heard people like, are we even capable of continuing growth and all that? Well, we know the answer to that, but I just want to kind of have a bit of an explanation of that.
You want to take? Sure.
So when we start reaching the higher numbers, it is kind of an indication that we need to start looking at something further, just because treatment becomes more difficult for us. Sludge storage becomes more difficult. Like, there's just a lot of processes that start reaching capacity. So it's just an indicator to start being aware that something needs to happen.
Any other further questions from council? I guess I've got one just again on the capacity. If you could comment on, on the thoughts, is the 1,700 overall plant capacity, if it's underrated or not? And how could we, as we reach a capacity of 1,700, however that was determined and when that was determined, to how the plant was run back in that time to today, it's obviously in our expansion, we are looking at expanding the plant and everything else, but when I see that the flows were 3,600, almost double, understanding what you said a little bit, that it was a different part of the plant, but I'm just curious if you could comment on what that would look like on confirming if 1,700 is real and right.
That would have to be assessed by an engineer to determine the overall rated capacity. So the 3,600 is temporary, so peak performance of the plant. I would say if the plant was running at 3,600, 365 days a year, you would be struggling to meet treatment. But you can, on a rainy day, accept a little bit more sewage and process it and still produce high quality effluent with that.
Yeah, it's like, but it's amazing if the plant was rated percentage, like, you know, if the overall plant, which real and right number was 1,800 or 1,900 or 1,850, it's amazing the capacity that would give us. And is that quite a process to just confirm kind of that, again, 1,700 overall is real and right? If I'm explaining myself right?
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff, could you mind if Jeff Little had his hand up?
Yeah, if you don't, maybe I'll answer that, to the deputy mayor. So, I can bring that information to council. BM Ross actually has done that, determination because there's a number of different processes inside the plant itself that, not, some of them are over the 1,700 and some of them may be under the 1,700. So they've broken down that processes. And so there is the clarifiers, there's the, you know, the headworks building, that sort of thing. So I can bring that to council. I'm sure it's in one of the BM Ross's documents that they presented when they started the expansion process. And just a second follow-up to that too. Also, you have to keep in mind that we have to follow the MTO, or not the MTO, I'm getting my ministries mixed up. We have to follow our ministry rating, so that even though we could say the plant can run at 17 and a half, it still has to meet the license from the ministry, and the ministry bases that license on our process. So I believe the plant was updated, and Ron, forgive me, but it's roughly about 2012, 2011, and the ministry re-rated that plant then and gave us the benefit of an extra higher rating. And then, so even though the plant may be able to process a little bit more, we still have to hit the ministry rating of the plant.
No, it'll be, yeah, I won't drag that out any further, but I think it may be something, it's interesting, you know, 12 years ago, again, I assume the plant operationally is different from 10 years ago. It'd be interesting to potentially, again, I don't know the expense in that, but with the efficiencies of water usage and everything else, you know, if we look at re-rating it and it could, you know, could be re-rated like it was 12 years ago, even a little bit more capacity will really increase our percentage. But anyways, it'll be something I'll leave with you. Go ahead.
And just a follow-up though, one of the, and then this goes back to Councillor Hodgins's question on the sludge and how much sludge we're using. So one of the things that was not re-rated in the 2011 was sludge storage. So we are really lacking the sludge storage even at 1,700, and that's why we're doing the emergency now that we've reached over 80%. We just can't run the gamut on what we should store there. So even if we were able to get a re-rating, we still haven't really built out our storage to meet the last re-rating from 2011, 2012. So that would be the biggest one I think we struggle with right now, is the storage. But anyways, we can follow up and present more information.
Yeah, and I guess as things evolve with it, again, if it was possible and it doesn't, our growth doesn't get stunted because of that, and we end up being restricted, it'd just be something to consider. So, okay, thank you. And then I believe, oh, sorry, is there any other questions of council on this? And then Renee, I think you're going to the next, yeah, what? Okay. I think Susan's gonna join.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of council and staff. Renee and I are pleased to be with you this morning to provide you with an update on the One Water Education Program. This was recently presented to 2 classrooms at the Wilberforce Public School. Next slide, thank you. So a little bit about the program. For over 30 years, Aqua has actually been going into classrooms and providing education on water and water treatment as well as wastewater. We've also been happy to provide facility tours to children, and we've also attended children's water festivals. And because there was so much interest in the education of water and wastewater, we actually got together with educators and we developed the One Water Education Program. So this all came about in 2014. And it's in conjunction with the grade 8 curriculum. So teachers are really excited about it because it helps them teach the water module. And there's been a lot of really good feedback. I should also mention it is based on the Blue Box methodology, which was a success when it first came out, because the idea is the children bring the messaging back to their parents. So it's quite effective. Okay, next slide. Great. So to date, more than 3,000 students across Ontario have participated in the program. Our operators visit the classrooms and they conduct hands-on activities from things like turbidity, the water treatment process, and also very important to Lucan is what not to flush. At the end of the program, students are actually given a quiz to test whether they've retained the information, and Renee will be going into the results of the Wilberforce classrooms. And because we're also looking for continuous improvement, we also look to feedback from the principal and the teachers themselves. So just wanted to share with you the testimonial that we received from the principal at Wilberforce. It was really great. She said, "We are grateful for this partnership and the knowledge and experience that the Aqua staff and presenters brought to our students." So we were really happy to receive that. And we look forward to continuing to deliver this program to more communities and groups in your community, I should say. So now I'm going to hand it over to Renee to talk about the Wilberforce Public School presentations.
Thank you. So on February 21st, we presented to 2 different classrooms within Wilberforce. And as you can see pictured here, we have 3 of our staff operators. Mike Green is a supervisor within the Lucan cluster, and Emily Simons, she's our co-op student. So it's nice to have the co-op student involved in this, as well as then there's another picture of Mike. This program is very interactive and it keeps all the students engaged and learning lots. So there were 71 students that we educated on the 21st, and everybody was really excited to get involved in the program. Next slide. So this is a quiz that the students were given at the end to see the knowledge that they retained. And it was very interesting to see some of the responses, and it was good feedback and very interactive, keeps everybody engaged within our presentation. We don't have a lot of time to present, so we try to keep them as engaged as possible and teach as much as we can. Some were more difficult than others, but overall there was 65% said that they had a lot of knowledge that they brought back. Next slide. So that's the quick overview of our, we speak of One Water so much when we do these presentations, and I thought this is a really good opportunity for Susan and I to give you a little bit of background, since we just presented to Wilberforce, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the program.
Thank you. I'll look out to my counselors. Was there any further questions? Councilor Reagan?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So thanks for the presentation. I'm really interested in just wanting to know what other groups are planned to get the training that you mentioned. And I'd be really interested in taking this quiz afterwards, or members of council taking this quiz. But I just think some of the results are kind of interesting with, especially number 5, this says what is not part of the filtration process. And I think 30% retain that. So I think that's all kind of important. So, but yeah, I was just wondering what other groups are planned to do this besides the Wilberforce students?
So we do typically focus on the grade 8s. That is the main focus, but we are absolutely open to any service groups, Boy Scouts. We had talks with Councillor Westman regarding doing this with the Boy Scouts. Okay. And we're happy to present to any of the anybody of interest because we want to get the message out there. It's very important.
Thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. No, I just think it's, if I may, I just think it's really important that we start with educating young people on how to do it, but it's just not limiting it to just younger people, but just older people as well. I think need that education as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for that. Good job. Thanks.
Anything further, Councillor Hodgins?
Thank you, through you. I think it's great. It's great to see the photos and the quiz results too. So thanks for sharing that. I hope this is something that can continue. And I'm not sure if there is an opportunity, but maybe if it is possible to have a field trip to see, a wastewater treatment plant facility, I think that'd be pretty exciting for the kids. I know logistically it might be challenging and keeping that all safe, but I remember doing one of those when I was in college, going to the Greenway plant in London, and it was like, I still remember it because it was like, wow. So I'm not sure if that could be considered, but maybe it's just an idea.
We are in constant communications with the schools, and a lot of times they do come out and do field trips. During COVID, there was kind of a halt to that, but sometimes with the One Water program, that is part of the education package where they come out. If there's construction or something going on, we typically don't allow anybody into the plant. But overall, yes, it can be part of the program. It is part of the program. Some of the principals and teachers are absolutely amazing in helping us promote this. So yes, that is an option.
And thank you. Anything further? Okay. No, I just want to reiterate what everyone else said, but just I think that's great. And ideally hitting that same class group, so it's new people every year, I think would be great. And that'll help change obviously bad habits or unknown how they're doing things at home and themselves. So no, that's great. Thank you. I don't know if was there anything further?
No, there's nothing further. If there's no more questions. The third part was the client operations report, the fourth quarter that I was just presenting for information, just because Cindy had gone through the annual reports, which is a lot of the same information. So I would be happy to answer any questions if there was anything for the client operations reports.
Okay. Jeff, do you have something? Okay. Council is satisfied right now. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and through the Deputy Mayor, I just would like to say thank you to Aqua coming out and presenting this. I personally believe that the education with the kids needed to be showcased here today. I think that's really, we need to make sure everybody understands where this stuff comes from and goes. So I was really impressed, and I think that's a real good foundation to start with, and making sure the word gets out on how the systems and where the systems are and how they work. So I just thought it was great.
Thank you, Jeff. I agree.
Thanks, Jeff. And nope, thanks, Susan, Renee, and Cindy. Appreciate that. And good timing because we have our integrity commissioner zooming in at 9:30. So perfect.
Thank you.
Take care. And with that, we're gonna go to the agenda to, what number is that? 12.1A. Tina, do you want to just quickly brief to our guest, introduce our guest and what's about to happen? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor, and to members of council. So we do have a report in front of you today just regarding the council code of conduct and complaint protocol for members. You'll recall earlier this year, our integrity commissioner, Mr. Mascarin, joined to just provide some training for council members. And with integrity commissioner being new, he has reviewed our previous one and has presented a new proposed code of conduct for members, which is very similar to our previous one. This one is just more consistent with Mr. Mascarin and what he uses for all the municipalities that he represents. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Mr. Mascarin, who's going to just give a brief summary and review that with you all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hi, John, proceed, please.
Hey, good morning, Deputy Mayor and members of council. Thank you very much for having me back. Ms. Murner has given a good summary. When I did some training back, I believe it was January 2nd, you started the year off really well there with the ethical underpinnings. I had indicated that I would consider putting together a new code for you. I found that the other code, your earlier code, was deficient in a number of instances. Deficient, I'm trying to use the politest term. There was nothing that was terribly wrong with it. It just that it was a little inconsistent. It had some flaws, and I thought it would be better to use what I would call a more modernized contemporary code. And it is the version of a code of conduct and complaint protocol that we typically will ask our municipalities if they would like to consider. Just very quickly, I just wanted to highlight just a couple of things that I found that were of issue, and I'll try not to belabor this, but your earlier code had a provision on general integrity, which I found incredibly broad, and it was so open and, in my words, so flexible as to make almost anything that any council member would do subject to a possible code complaint, because it had a lot of general motherhood statements. And I suggested to your staff that some of the provisions might work much better as key principles, but not operative enforcement provisions of the code. Things like members always have to deal with matters with honesty and integrity. That would cause a whale of a problem for council if that was an operative section of the code. Not that there's anything wrong with the actual statement or as a principle, but as an enforceable clause, it's problematic. I found part 4, dealing with conflicts of interest, interesting because they largely replicated, but with some changes in what's already in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and it's already governed by that statute. And I would worry that some people would try to bypass that statute, which I don't think you can do at law, and then just file code complaints dealing with municipal conflicts of interest. There was actually some provisions that appeared to conflict with the new authority in the Municipal Act for someone to file a code of an application directly to the Integrity Commissioner. I was a little bit concerned about the conduct of council and council meetings, and my question was, does council really want the Integrity Commissioner to be the arbitrator of the conduct at meetings? And the reason I ask that, Deputy Mayor, members of council, is typically there should be some autonomy and governance by the council or the committee itself and the chair of the committee. And we shouldn't have the Integrity Commissioner that necessarily weighs in on what I would call trivial or borderline matters. I think those should be covered under your procedure bylaw and should be regulated by the chair in accordance with the procedures under the procedure bylaw. So I question whether there was really a need to govern the conduct of council meetings as opposed to councillor conduct at other points. Now, if something is egregiously bad at a council meeting, I fully would accept that the Integrity Commissioner could have authority. But the general position is that most Integrity Commissioners will not dive into matters dealing with the conduct or decorum at meetings, because that's supposed to be under the purview of the chair of the meeting. There were a number of provisions with respect to conduct respecting staff, and I suggested that maybe some of those provisions could be captured in a council staff relations policy, a separate standalone policy that's governed under Section 270 of the Municipal Act. I question why the Section 11 was in there at all, Part 11, dealing with expenses. I just didn't understand why that was even in the code. Part 15, what I thought was problematic because it dealt with penalties, and there are 2 under the Municipal Act, but it also dealt with other matters, but referred to them as penalties when there are only 2 penalties that could be imposed under the Municipal Act. And I attempted to clarify that in the new code. And then finally, there was very skeletal provisions or provisions that I didn't find were really helpful, dealing with the procedure, dealing with complaints and investigation. And accordingly, I have drafted a what I would call a pretty comprehensive complaint protocol that deals with how natural justice and procedural fairness will be afforded to all parties who are in an investigation matter. That's not only the complainant, it's also the member who's under investigation, or members, and also potentially witnesses and other persons who may be involved. So I've tried to tighten up some of the sections that I thought were a little bit loose in your old provisions. And there was a section dealing, part 23, dealing with requests for advice, which I actually found one section was completely inaccurate, and it talked about certain information being subject to MFIPA, which it isn't at all, because there's a carve out in section 223.5 sub 3 of the Municipal Act, which is there deliberately. And it basically says anything that relates to a code of conduct matter, or anything under part 5.1 of the Municipal Act dealing with codes of conduct, integrity commissioners, investigations, the advice giving, is all dealt with there, and is not subject to FOIs under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. It lifts those completely out, and it leaves everything subject to confidentiality, subject to, as I indicated to you, some very limited exceptions. One of them being when the Integrity Commissioner brings forward a report where the Integrity Commissioner has discretion to disclose what he or she believes may be necessary. So, Deputy Mayor, members of council, those are at least some things that I found on a quick review of your former code that I was very concerned about, and I thought could use some improvement. So I provided the draft code that Ms. Murner was kind enough to attach to her report. As you all know, codes of conduct are mandatory for members of council and members of your local boards. So the members of your municipality's local boards are also have to have a code of conduct. And what I've done is I've created a single code that covers both members of council and members of your local boards. My view is you should be subject to the same accountability regime. There is a recognition in your code of conduct up front that members of council do essentially do this as their, let's just say, full-time job. Whereas, right, you look at omnibus matters dealing with the municipality. Whereas members of local boards are in a different setting. They only look after the special purpose of the committee or the board that they've been appointed to. So there is a recognition of that. But there is a single code, and I thought that would be better than having multiple codes for different local boards, or one separately for all members of local boards and one separately for council. You'll see right at the very front, and by the way, Deputy Mayor, I'm not going to belabor this. I'll just give you a quick overview, and then I'll ask if you have any questions, because otherwise we could talk all morning about this, and I don't intend to do that. I've put up right up front a purpose section in the code that talks about the purpose of the code to establish a general standard for which acceptable conduct is required from all members of council. And you'll see that I make reference to a number of other statutes that cover potentially ethical conduct in some way or another. That doesn't mean that a member of the public can enforce the provisions of these other statutes through the code of conduct or through some other ethical regime. But it just says the code of conduct is supplementary to all of these other statutes. You'll see 1.2 makes reference to all members of the council and the local boards being subject to the code. And then in section 2, I have set out a statement of principles. And you'll see in 2.2, starting at page 2, a number of general principles that all members should adhere to. And my comment earlier about your old code, your former code, or actually your current code right now until you repeal it and perhaps adopt a new one, is that many of these statements were actual operative provisions of the old code. And you'll see that many of these are largely large, broad motherhood statements where you can almost shelter any kind of complaint. And I just don't think that's right. Okay, so I've put them in as aids to the interpretation and the application of the code, but not as operative provisions. Section 3 contains many of the definitions that will be used in the code. I think it's an aid to interpretation. You'll see that it goes through a number of the terms that are going to be used in the code. I thought that would be helpful. There are some general obligations at paragraph 4, but I've actually narrowed this down from earlier iterations of the code where they were just, I think, a little too broad. So I've tried to narrow them down. There's only 4 there. Section 5 is a respectful conduct provision. And you may recall in the training that I provided to you, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing has prescribed 4 mandatory subject matters that every municipality's code of conduct must have. Respectful conduct is one of them, and it's dealt with in section 5 here. I also wanted to note very clearly that the provision in Regulation 5518, the regulation that prescribes the 4 subject matters, says that the council has to deal with, in a code of conduct, respectful conduct. And then it says, including conduct towards officers and employees of the municipality. So that is captured under this provision. It deals with respectful conduct towards everybody. That's members of the public, fellow members of council between themselves, but also specifically dealing with staff. And that's one of the largest areas of concern, harassment of staff by local politicians. You probably have heard that the province is coming forward with some legislation. Minister Calandra indicated that while the province was not moving ahead with Bill 5, the Harassing of Local Politicians Act, it was going to move ahead with some form of legislation, and that's expected sometime in the late spring. We haven't seen anything yet. So Section 5 deals with respectful conduct towards all persons, but including most particularly staff, because that was highlighted in the regulation that the minister enacted. Another provision dealing with the regulation was the use of municipal resources and property, and that's covered in Section 6 of your code. And again, I'm not going to belabor exactly what the provisions say. I'm just going to highlight that 2 out of the 4 are already covered in Sections 5 and 6. Section 6 basically says the property of the municipality is there for the municipality and for the discharge of your official duties, but you are not to use it for your own personal or any other purpose other than your official duties as municipal councillors. Section 7 deals with gifts, benefits, and hospitality. Once again, another provision that is prescribed. And Section 7.1 sets it out relatively well. It says at the beginning, there's a sort of a statement, and that any gift to a member risks the appearance of improper influence. And that's really why these provisions are in there. It starts off as a general prohibition. Members of council can't receive any kind of gift, benefit, or hospitality. And then section 7.3 carves out a number of exceptions, because it would be silly if you couldn't receive, for instance, if you visit a resident and you were meeting with them at their home and you couldn't receive a beverage or a coffee or tea from them, or you're meeting someone and perhaps having lunch and they offer to pay for a Tim Hortons lunch for you. I think it would be silly for you not to accept certain gifts. Clearly, you are entitled to accept payment for your public service as elected representatives. So those are a bunch of carve-outs in section 7.3. I can tell you that almost every code that I have seen has the provisions for gifts, benefits, and hospitalities that works very much like this one. Finally, the other prescribed subject matter in the regulation is what's covered in section 8 of your code, which is confidential information. As you know, you as members of council will receive confidential information, some of which may be protected by other privacy legislation. For instance, personal information under section 1 of MFIPA, that you're not allowed to disclose, that no one is allowed to disclose, but you may be entitled to receive that information as a member of council. You are also entitled to receive information beyond what any other person in the municipality is entitled to receive in a closed meeting, because you are allowed under section 239 of the Municipal Act to receive information and to be able to discuss and debate matters in 14 specific subject areas. That information is strictly confidential. It belongs to the municipality and is not to be disclosed by any member of council. That's what the provisions in section 8 seek to put in place. By the way, this is one of the largest provisions where we do have many complaints from municipalities that council members have breached confidential information. So again, sections 5, 6, 7, and 8 of your code are all provisions that are set out in Regulation 5518 as mandatory subject matters that must be governed by a municipal code of conduct. Okay. And then you'll see there are additional provisions in section 9 dealing with discrimination and harassment. The province may be coming forward with legislation, as I've mentioned there, and it basically says that you are not to harass, bully, intimidate any person or attempt to derogate from someone's quiet enjoyment, quiet workspace at a workplace. There's section 10 dealing with improper use of influence. Your influence is only to be used for your own official duties. Conflicts of interest are covered partially. It says in section 11.1 that members are required to comply with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. But then it says very clearly that a contravention or alleged contravention of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act can't be enforced through the Code of Conduct, because the only way you can enforce it is through the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And I see many municipalities make that error, and people are always filing complaints under codes of conduct as opposed to filing them under the MCIA. And section 11.2 also covers off conflicts of interest that are not financial in nature. The MCIA covers financial matters. 11.2 covers non-financial conflicts of interest. Okay. Then section 12 talks about members being observant and having to adhere to any policies that council may put in place from time to time. We had to deal with this clause quite often last term of council with the COVID-19 pandemic and certain workplace restrictions, distancing limitations, vaccination policies. There is some enhancement of the Municipal Elections Act that puts in place a number of regulations dealing with the conduct during an election period. This seeks to also assist in that and has some provisions dealing with not using staff time or other resources of the municipality during an election campaign. Sections 14 and 15 deal with media relations and social media. They're relatively brief sections of the code, and section 16 deals with the respect for the code of conduct. So it's council's code. Council adopts the code. The words in section 223.2 is council establishes a code. So council members should have a respect for the code, and that's what these sections say. So there's no reprisals for anyone who comes forward and brings a complaint, or for any witnesses that may come forward and give evidence. And of course, there's the requirement, which we often do not find is adhered to by some municipalities, where an integrity commissioner is dealt with hostilely, with some hostility, as if it's a person who is trying to disrupt things. We're only trying to do our job. And so we ask that you please deal with us courteously, respectively, and that you do cooperate. So those sections have found their way into many municipal codes now. Then you'll see section 17 deals with penalties, and there only are 2 penalties. The Ontario Divisional Court in Magder and Ford said there are only 2 penalties, and those are the ones that are specified in the Municipal Act. There's a reprimand, which is exactly what you would think it is, a censure, some sort of indication that council is very displeased by the conduct of the member and denounces it. And 2, there is a potential penalty for up to 90 days suspension of pay. That's not suspension from your duties as being a member of council. You're still required to carry those out, but it's a suspension of your remuneration for up to 90 days. Okay. Section 18 are not penalties. Section 18 of your code deals with remedial measures and corrective actions. These were folded into the section that was called penalties, and that's an error. The court, again, the Magder and Ford case, has recognized that a municipality is able, as part of its regulatory powers, to seek to enforce a code of conduct by imposing a remedial measure or a corrective action to any contravention. But it can't be punitive in nature. It can't be a penalty because there's only 2, but it can be something else. And we've written a number of them. For instance, an apology, the return of property or any reimbursement that was unlawfully acquired, the removal or the non-appointment of a member from another committee or a board by council, the removal or the non-appointment of a person as the chair of a board, committee, tribunal by council. And then finally, E, a compliance with any other remedial measure or corrective action that the Integrity Commissioner may deem appropriate. Again, we recommend to council, and that's how this code has been set up. We as Integrity Commissioner do not impose any penalties nor remedial measures. We only recommend those. There are a number of our municipalities that have given that authority to us as Integrity Commissioners, basically saying to us, we want you to be the investigator and the adjudicator. And there's various reasons for that. One, council perhaps doesn't want to sit in judgment of its own members. 2, maybe they feel the political winds may be blowing at a particular time and the result may not be justified. So there are reasons why they've done that. In most instances, municipalities, their councils have retained the authority to impose, to be the judge and impose the penalties or the remedial measures. And that's how I've set up this code. I've done it in that way, okay? There's a section towards the end that talks about legal fees. You're not entitled to legal fees if there's an investigation. Because why? Well, we're neutral, impartial, and objective. So we're not trying to hammer any member of council on a report or investigation, nor are we trying to absolve you and get you off the hook. We're just trying to find out what happened and make findings, draw conclusions, and potentially make recommendations. So there should be really no need for any legal costs there. There should also be no legal costs for you to get advice on the ethical regime, because that's our job as Integrity Commissioner. You're entitled to come to us for specific advice on any matters that you may feel you need advice on under the Code of Conduct, any other ethical policy that you may have, for instance, the Council Staff Relation Policy, and the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So again, there should be no need for you to resort to any other legal fees. So there's a specific provision there that says you're not going to be entitled to that. Section 20, you'll see, adds the complaint protocol to the code as an appendix. And Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of council, I'm just very briefly going to say I'm not going to walk you through the complaint protocol. It is probably, I think, as long, if not even a little bit longer than the Code of Conduct. And you may say to yourself, why is that? Why is it even longer than the code? The reason there is we want to ensure that any investigation is conducted appropriately. And in the words of the courts that have had to interpret this, what the courts have said when there's an investigation by an integrity commissioner as to whether a member has breached the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, an ethical policy, procedure rule, or the Code of Conduct, what the integrity commissioner has to offer is a fair process for all of the parties. So that's why we've put in a very robust, at least in my words, robust, comprehensive complaint procedure that will afford procedural fairness to all parties and give the member an opportunity to respond and give the member an opportunity to see a final draft of a report. Because if there are findings of contravention, you should have an opportunity to convince us that maybe we're wrong, that we shouldn't have found that there has been a contravention of the code or some other ethical policy. So we will give to you a draft of the final report if we have found a contravention, to give you an opportunity to respond, to give us submissions on that. And the reason that's important is when the report comes back in front of council with recommendations, the courts have said that the integrity commissioner's findings are final and determinative, and that council can't look into the findings or attempt to overturn the findings or reach its own conclusions and make its own findings. That is the job, the role of the integrity commissioner. So it's imperative, in our view, that the member be given an opportunity before the findings go before council to give final submissions. And that's the division between the investigative process, which is the integrity commissioner's process, and then the adjudicative process, which is council to make a decision, but only on the recommendations that are in the report, not as to the findings that have been concluded by the integrity commissioner. And all of that is covered in the complaint protocol. The other thing that's covered there is how an application under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act is dealt with by the integrity commissioner. There's a lacuna, a gap in the legislation, because there's a provision in the Municipal Act that says when the integrity commissioner receives an application under the MCIA that a member is alleged to have contravened the statute, the integrity commissioner shall carry out an inquiry at his or her own discretion. That leaves a lot of leeway. And quite honestly, while it sounds great for integrity commissioners, I don't think it really is, because there's no safeguards there. It can be determined on a case-to-case basis how an integrity commissioner would deal with something. So we've put in a process into the Code of Conduct that governs how those applications will be dealt with. And it's very much in the same way as the code of conduct. Again, offering all members and applicants and other witnesses procedural fairness throughout the whole process. We've put it in the code of conduct, in the complaint protocol, because we thought that was the best place to have it covered off. We find that many integrity commissioners don't have any rules dealing with the MCIA, and we think that's a problem, because anyone could argue that it wasn't reasonable for the integrity commissioner to have done something in a particular instance. So we've set out rules and we will follow them. Sometimes, and there is something built into the code on this, sometimes we will exercise our discretion. I'll give you an example. We get a complaint, we're dealing with the complaint, we should try to deal with it expeditiously, and we offer the member an opportunity to reply to the complaint, to file a response. And there's a time limit in there. The member may be out of the country. The member may be hospitalized. The member may be bereaving someone. There may be a need for accommodation. And we've built in some discretion for the integrity commissioner to be able to enlarge or extend time periods. It cuts both ways. The integrity commissioner is also entitled to do that in the case of a complainant or an applicant that can't respond within a certain period of time. We will exercise our discretion. We will consider what the case law has said. In some instances, there's been delays of up to a year for members who have had medical issues, and the courts have said that in some instances, while the integrity commissioner's investigation has been quite lengthily delayed, there are good reasons for that to do so. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of council, those are my very quick high-level comments, and I think I went through the code just a little bit in more detail to give you a sense of what was in there. But I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you or any members of council may have on the regulatory regime that we're seeking to put in place for you.
Thank you very much. That was a great explanation of tightening things up, and our plan is to adopt the new code today. But I want to thank you for your time. I will ask council if there was any questions before we let you go. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Mascaron. Thanks for the updated policies and information. One question in the conflict of, or sorry, not the conflict of interest, code of conduct policy, item 11.2 for non-pecuniary conflicts. I
Yes.
saw that it states that the member shall declare and then leave the meeting. And my understanding is that with pecuniary conflicts, we don't necessarily have to leave the meeting. So is this, are we making it so non-pecuniary, you have to leave, but like our standard practice hasn't necessarily been leaving the room for pecuniary interests. So is that okay to have both, like different?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Hodge, that is an excellent question. You picked up on something that is really a little bit of a thorn in my side. The Integrity Commissioners of Ontario had a sort of a loose organization called MICO, the Municipal Integrity Commissioners of Ontario. And this group would often be consulted by the province. And I was on a subcommittee to speak about changes to the Municipal Act that, in a sense, brought about some of the changes to Bill 68. One of the things that we said to members of council is codes of conduct, to the province, to the policy folks that were putting in place the new modifications. We said one of the things that is being put forward, and that both of the larger judicial inquiries that took place in Mississauga and Collingwood said, is that codes of conduct can cover non-financial interests. So many municipalities will cover non-pecuniary interests. Here's the issue. When you declare a pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, you are allowed to stay in the council chamber at the council meeting, and your vote will just not count because you're disqualified if you declare a pecuniary interest. And that's absolutely clear under the Municipal Act. So you're allowed to stay there at the council table. And then when it comes time to vote, you're just not allowed to vote, or the clerk will not call your name because you've declared a pecuniary interest. Okay. And it says your vote just is non-existent. It doesn't say the same thing for non-pecuniary interest, because it says anyone can ask for a recorded vote, and unless a member is disqualified by a statute, the member's vote counts in the negative. Now, that may also be covered by your procedure bylaw. It very often is. So that creates a really awkward situation. And I've said to members of council, you have to be really careful, because if you declare a non-pecuniary interest and you remain at the council table, your vote, because you're not disqualified by a statute from voting, you're disqualified by the code of conduct, the clerk on a recorded vote can still ask for your vote. And if you say I abstain, your vote goes to the negative. So it could either prejudice your position, which you shouldn't have, or it could actually advance your position. And believe me, I've had some council members who have just crossed their arms and said, I'm not leaving this room, because they know their vote would be counted in the negative, which is what they want. So we've built that into the code. And Councillor Hodges, you're absolutely right. It sets up a different sort of regime, because in the municipal conflict of interest area, you are allowed to remain at the council table and your vote just won't count. It's like non-existent. Whereas it would be counted in the negative if it's a non-pecuniary interest. So that's why we have that wording in that section. I know it's confusing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anything further from council? Councillor Reagan?
Hi, thank you. Just really
Oh,
two
sorry.
things really quick. No, my question was the same as Councillor Hodges about 11.2, and I wasn't sure I understood. The other question I had is that upon adoption of the protocol, do we need to have, seems to be some changes. So I'm just maybe for Ron's question for Ron, maybe if I may, do we need new training for this? And the question I had too is that if it applies to board members and committee members, do we have to let them know of this change in policy as well? I stole your question, I know, councillors.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, through you. Yes, you should have had a code that applied to local board members since March the 1st, 2019. That's when it was put in place. And I'm sorry, I can't remember your old code, whether it also applied to board members, but it applies to them. I leave it to you whether you feel that you need additional training on the new code and the complaint protocol. I'd be happy to provide it. I think the earlier advice that I gave you in January was, in a sense, looking forward to this new code potentially being adopted. So I'll be honest, I think I've covered it, but I'd be pleased to come back, maybe do a shorter session if you or perhaps senior staff feel that it's necessary. I think notice should be given to all local board members, and a copy of the code and the complaint protocol be sent to them. I could certainly do a session for them if you feel that it's appropriate and necessary for them to also be trained, or if council was going to be trained, perhaps they could be invited to just watch that meeting and listen in to any additional training. So those are my suggestions, Councillor.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Is there
Thank you.
anything further from council? Okay, no, I'll just want to thank you again for all the great information, and that will be I've got a recommended motion here to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor and members of council. I very much appreciate the opportunity to come before you to explain this. and for you to even consider the new code. I really do respect that you did that, and that's very commendable. I thank you very much, and I remain available anytime that you feel that you might need any input from me. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.
You as well.
Now, Ron, did you want any follow-up to Councillor Reagan's comment there? It was kind of now just if there was staff, if there's
Yeah,
questions to
what I-
staff now, we'll put it
Yeah.
over to
So
staff.
through the deputy mayor to Councillor Regan, my answer to that question is absolutely. The boards need a copy of the new code of conduct, and they will be directed to watch the session that John Mascarin did on January, I think it was January 2nd, that meeting. Is that a closed session? Ah, okay, then we can't do it that way. Yeah. Yeah, let me think about how to proceed, but I absolutely correct. They need to be aware of this, number one, and they need to be educated on what it means to them and their role. So that will be on a go forward basis. We'll figure that out.
Councillor Reagan?
Deputy Mayor, just as a suggestion, if I may, I don't know whether or not we need to bring back the Integrity Commissioner for the training. I was wondering if something that staff could train. That's why I was directing the question to you, and he kind of jumped in there. But that's why I was directing the question to you, is because they are your staff. And of course, I'm not sure how that would disseminate to the board members or committee members as well. But again, it was just a question, and it didn't require immediate action, but just something for us to think about, I think.
Yeah, so my suggestion would be that every member of boards and committees get a copy of this, review it, and then we'll go through it. We'll specifically put it on the agenda for the next meetings, and we can actually go through that point by point and sort of highlight the important parts. I don't think we have to go through it word by word, but there's certain sections in there that are very important and have an impact. So.
Right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Deputy
you.
Mayor. Thank you, sir.
Was there anything further to staff? Councillor Hodgins?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, just further to the discussion we're having, I think the main thing is, getting those policies to all the board members and allowing them to read it and make themselves aware of it. And then, if we can address it at each committee, answer any questions that they may have. Maybe that's the process. I'm just not sure. Certainly I don't think we need to bring the Integrity Commissioner back in, but I think the policy speaks for itself for the most part.
Thank you. Is there anything further to staff? Seeing nothing, I do have I am going to go back. I've got a motion from Aqua to read yet, and I've got this one here in front of me. So there's a recommended motion here that council receive report number CL-04-2024 for information, and that council approve the new council code of conduct and complaint protocol as presented and passed the implementing bylaw to adapt the same. If I could get a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Reagan, seconded by Councillor Westman, all in favor, that's carried. Thank you. And I'm going to go back now. So Aqua's presentation, I just have a recommend a motion that council receive the Lucan and Granton 2023 annual reports and the fourth quarter operational reports from Aqua for information. I get a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Hodgins, seconded by Councillor Westman, all in favor. That's carried. Okay, thanks. We are, I'm going to go back to number 8, adoption of minutes. I've got a recommended motion here that the regular council meeting minutes of March 19, 2024 be approved as circulated. If I get a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Reagan, seconded by Councillor Westman, all in favor. That's carried. 9, business arising from the minutes. There is a 10.1. I'll have Ron just speak to that and the change of meeting date. I do have a recommended motion if you want to just speak to it briefly. I think I do. Or yes, I do.
Yeah, so just quickly through the deputy mayor, the county warden's golf tournament date is coincides with our second meeting in June. So the suggestion before council is to reschedule the Tuesday meeting to the previous day to the Monday night. So instead of Tuesday, June 18th, it would be Monday, June 17th. And that's to accommodate the golf tournament.
And there was a couple guests for that 19th, and it has been confirmed that they can meet on the 18th. So it won't disrupt anything that was planned. I got to recommend a motion that council direct staff to amend 2024 council meeting schedule by moving the June 18th regular council meeting to Monday, June 17th, 2024. Moved by Councilor Hodgins, seconded by Councilor Westman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And then balance of correspondence. And no one wants to, that was the only thing pulled. I've got here that Councilor Hodgins, do you want to speak to something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I wanted to speak to item number 4, which is a resolution passed by the Township of Adelaide Metcalfe regarding tile drain loan amounts. And they are calling on the province to increase the maximum amount permitted for these loans from $50,000 to $100,000. And certainly there's been major cost increases for construction as well as this type of work. So it just limits the ability for farmers and people who need municipal drains to get those loans. So I would like to move a motion to support that resolution for Adelaide Metcalfe.
I guess I'll look to council if no one, yeah, and then whatever's the easiest way to make that happen, I'll look to staff. And is there anything that I need to do as chair?
Nothing specific. So the motion will just be to support the motion of the Adelaide Metcalfe in regards to the request to increase tile drain loan limits. Yep. So it was moved by Jaden and
Seconded by Councilor Westman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward. Was there anything else you want to bring forward? Nope.
That's it. Thank you.
For the balance of correspondence that items 10.1 through 10.2 correspondence be received for information purposes. Moved by Councilor Reagan, seconded by Councilor Hodgins. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Committee reports, Blue Water Recycling. I do not have anything. CEDC.
I do have something brief from our last meeting, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So during that meeting, the results of a recent Main Street survey was presented to the committee members. And Lisa will have a summary of those results, and she will have that presented to the next council meeting, and that'll be attached to the minutes. We have a business after 5 seminar starting, and the first one's planned for April 8th, and that's hosted by A1 Chiropractic. And these are basically where businesses are inviting other businesses to sort of tour their business, see what they're doing, talk about best practices, basically just trying to foster a partnership between our downtown businesses. The other item happened is the committee discussed Main Street night markets. There were a number of dates that were being proposed, and those will be advertised as they come up. And this is being organized in partnership with the Lucan local, which is the Kelsey Coveney. And she, by the way, was just appointed as a new member to our committee, Mr. Deputy Mayor, as one of our members resigned because they moved. And finally, the committee also discussed some upcoming workshops for local businesses, including accessibility, funding, and marketing information. And that'll be discussed on an ongoing basis. And our next meeting is scheduled for May 29th. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Did anyone have questions? Okay, no, thank you very much. Lake Huron, there's nothing. There's 2 fire board minutes there from for Lucan Biddulph and Biddulph Blanchard Fire Board. If anyone had any questions of Ron, they're just straightforward, but if anyone had questions, now's the time to ask them. Okay. Councilor Hodgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I was just wondering, maybe to Ron, with the mayor on the, I guess, her leave of absence for the election and everything. Will there be someone else sitting on these 2 boards or committees in the meantime, or just what are the next steps with that?
Well, with any luck, there won't be any of these meetings during her time away. So I'm not expecting any issues. So at least at this point in time, anyway. So
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything to add for ABCA or
Yeah,
upper Thames?
I got a couple
Okay.
updates on ABCA. It's quite a few items attached there. So we met March 21st and went over the audited financial statements. Some positive news there with some of the investment revenues coming in much higher than 2022 when there was a bit of a loss. Following the meeting, there was a partner appreciation event at Ironwood Golf Course. It was well attended, and there was an interesting presentation from some students that have some environmental activities going on in Exeter. Also to report, there is a letter attached from the ABCA on some new regulations that come into effect on yesterday, April 1st. And what these new regulations do, there is now one excuse me, one consolidated minister's regulation for all of the conservation authorities in Ontario. Previously, each conservation authority had its own individual specific regulation for all 36 of them. So now there's one consolidated that applies to each of the conservation authorities. And also with this updated regulation, there's some updates to definitions for areas where development is prohibited. There's also several low-risk activities that are now exempt from having to get permits from the Conservation Authority. And those are things like floating docks, fences, accessory structures, 15 square meters or smaller, 15 square meter decks and patios, and also municipal drain maintenance is now exempt from having to get a permit from the conservation authorities. However, they still encourage consultation with them just to make sure it's not in a regulated area. There's also some changes to the ability for conservation authorities to put conditions on permits. Really, they're just scoped down to just controlling natural hazards and public safety due to natural hazards. And then there's some additional new rules for development. They have to make public maps available for where permits are required. Deem submissions complete or incomplete. So it's a pretty a big task for the conservation authorities now to adjust their policies and procedures for this new regulation. So they'll be very busy with that. And then just one last announcement from ABCA. Kate Monk, who has been working at ABCA for 34 years, is now retired. So she was thanked for all her great service, very knowledgeable there. So that's it for the update.
Thank you for that update. Was there any further questions for Councillor Hodgins? See none. No, thank you for that. Parks and Recreation.
I have nothing at this time, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Oh, nothing this time. Thank you. And then 12.1A we have dealt with. I don't think there was anything further. Yes, I did. Yeah, I did write up to his meetings. There's nothing further to add from the CAO clerk.
Just one, I will just maybe add, I did send out the invitation for Middlesex Municipal Day that's coming up on May 7th, which is being hosted in our community. So you can register using that link, or if you prefer, I can register as well. Just let me know. The due date for that is, I believe, the middle of April. So being hosted here, hopefully everyone's able to attend.
Yeah, with us hosting it, I think hopefully we can have our senior staff certainly attend, and then ideally as many council members that can. I'll ask Tina to send out a reminder before the registration date expires.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. That's good. Nothing from building and bylaw. Finance, I will pass it over to Catherine. 12.3A.
Thank you. The first report is regarding the appointment of the auditor. So per the Municipal Act, the township needs to have an external audit service. And the term can be up to 5 years, but the municipality can reappoint at the end of that term. Our procurement bylaw also lists audit services as an ongoing service. that time of renewal, the department manager may recommend to council that the service be continued. So the contract for audit services with Scrimgeour and Company will expire with the completion of the 2023 audit, and a new appointment is required. The recommendation is to appoint Scrimgeour and Company as the auditor for a term of 5 years for 2024 through 2028. There's many reasons to support this recommendation. Scrimgeour and Company have a long history with this township and have a lot of valuable historical financial information. Their staff are also knowledgeable and easy to work with. In recent years and in upcoming, we're experiencing several changes and have taken on new and large projects. We have some new systems that we're putting in. There's been legislated reporting requirements such as ARO, asset management, and DCs. So the township, I believe, would be best served in retaining Scrimgeour and Company, and also be the most efficient use of staff time, given all these reasons. Scrimgeour and Company, they do specialize in municipal audits and are always kept up to date on what is anything relating to the municipal sector. But there are options for council's consideration. One, you can renew and appoint Scrimgeour and Company as the external auditor for a period of up to 5 years, or direct staff to prepare an RFP for audit services. Scrimgeour and Company's fees have always been reasonable and competitive. We don't know the impact for 2024 budget. It's it'll be determined at the outcome of the decision made here. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. I will look to council. I do have a recommended motion. Before I read it, I'll ask if there's any questions, Catherine. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Catherine. Thanks for the report and all the information within it. I'm supportive of the recommendation. I just had one question, and that would be, is there a benefit to getting like a fresh set of eyes from a different auditor potentially, or like, is there a benefit through that process, or is this, there's obviously lots of benefits to keeping it with the same person. It's a lot more streamlined. They have all the background information and you don't have to sort of restart that process. But are there any benefits to, I guess, getting a fresh set of eyes on it?
That is always an opinion of, and up to council if that's what they would like to do. Sure, there could be benefits to that. The argument for retaining is given the at this time all the changes in using that historical and their knowledge of the system and our municipality to help us through all these changes, especially through 2024. So if you and then get through maybe to the next term of council. But yeah, there could be a benefit. It doesn't say that you can't go to tender, that Scrimgeour and Company most likely will put in a tender. So you may end up with the same result, but sometimes there is always fresh eyes is always good too.
Okay, thank you. No, I think we've been very happy with their services as noted in your report. So I am supportive of the recommendation to continue with them.
You got anything further from council? I'm going to read the recommended motion that report number FIN 05-2024 be received, and the council appoints Scrimgeour and Company as the auditor for a term of 5 years, 2024 through 2028. If I get someone to move that, moved by Councillor Hodgins, seconded by Councillor Westman. All in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. And then Catherine, I'll have you go to 12.3B, which is I think a formality. So yeah.
Thank you. This report is for your information. It's regarding our 2024 annual repayment limit. This information is provided by the ministry each year. And for 2024, the data is based on our 2022 financial results. This just determines how much is available to commit to payments for relating to debt and other financial obligations. And they gave a number, but I also, because it's based on 2022 numbers, I adjusted it to allow for the loans that we put in place in 2023 and the potential loans that we have in regards to the soccer field. So that brought the amount down to our ARL is now approximately 1.6 million. And put this into some terms. So that means that the additional long-term borrowing which the township could undertake would be a loan that's, if it's 20-year loan at an approximate 5% interest rate, would be about a $20 million loan. And then you would be out of ability to borrow further. You can't go above your annual repayment limit. So that just puts that in perspective for your information. And if there's any the requirement is that if there's any borrowing or potential borrowing coming up, that the treasurer needs to present this information and take into account the potential borrowing to give you that information to decide whether to move forward with taking on debt.
Okay, no, thank you for that and that explanation. I'll look to council before I read the recommended motion for information. Was there any further questions on this to Catherine? Councilor Reagan?
Mr. Deputy, I just had a question. I'm just wondering how this affects, or does it affect if any possible loans we might have to get for the sewage treatment plant?
As noted, if depending on the amount of that project that you need to borrow, if you have up to another $20 million that you could take on, and then you would not have any borrowing limit until such time the ARL is recalculated. So you could expand amount that you have as we get more revenue in, but it would be limited. You're in a good spot right now, but yeah, if it's $20 million, that's about the most you could have, but then it wouldn't be, that'd be it for a while.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Catherine.
Then Ron was just going to quickly comment here on something.
If I may, Mr. Deputy Mayor, just a further comment. So again, to the report, excellent report. We get these each and every year as they're updated. It sort of gives you a guideline. It doesn't mean we can't go over that. We can go, there is a process to go over that. You know, it's like your household budget. There's good debt and bad debt, you know, and in the case of a sewage treatment plant expansion, that would fall in the category of good debt. However, I mean, those are things that council has to keep in mind. It's how far do you want to, you know, how deep of a hole do you want to dig? And that's why it's so important. And that's why we continue to focus on grant opportunities to assist us so we don't reach those levels.
Oh, that makes sense. Thank you. I've got a recommended motion that report number FIN-06-2024 be received for information. If I get a mover, moved by Councilor Reagan, seconded by Councilor Westman. All in favor? And that's carried. Ron was just going to briefly mention something on planning.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm sure by now everybody has heard the announcement late last week. There was a provincial announcement for funding to the tune of about $25 million for a new school in Lucan. So that's a big feather in the cap of the Thames Valley District School Board. And I think, you know, I think we hopefully played a little part in that. But I'm going to be getting further details over the next couple of weeks. I'll have a better update for council at the first meeting in May.
Thank you. Well, now on to Public Works. Jeff's got a activity update. Jeff, I'm going to ask if you could go over each of your items, and then I'll ask for council at the end of your report just to make any notes for questions, if that's all right. You go over each item kind of briefly. That's a good report.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, it's just an activity report, kind of bring us up to what's happening in the spring. Very quickly, I'll go over each item. I don't think there needs to be a lot of information. They're fairly straightforward items. In the roadside, we are starting street sweeping. We will begin in the 1st of April or the first half of April. This is normal. This is our normal time that we do schedule it. Staff currently, we're grading roads constantly at this time of year, bringing them back into shape from the winter season, and cutting trees and trimming up branches prior to the trees leafing out. We have scheduled the green bins to be delivered April 18th, so that program will start mid-April. It'll be available at same locations as last year, Public Works Garage on Saintsbury, and the park area in Granton for a time period. We'll pull that bin again in the middle of the summer when the baseball programs start up in full swing. Greater spec and a request to quote have been released to John Deere and Caterpillar. The surplus 4x4 public works pickup was sold through Gov Deals. We ended up getting 67, a little over almost $6,800 for it. So I thought that was a really good way of doing the release of that truck. Staff training, we're right in the swing of updating a lot of our training. We included working from heights, chainsaw operation and trenching at this time, and we are looking for some other training as well coming up on book 7 and that sort of thing. The department, we have received our armadillo tracker. I think this is a good one. Council was interested in. We are going to be going out and start tracking our traffic speeds with this unit. It's a unit where it's a small box that people really won't notice. So it gets a better perspective of the patterns going through town. We're going to start this with the areas that we've already talked about for traffic calming measures. So we want to get an idea what's going out there before we put the traffic calming measures in. And this will be basically the school zone, Beach Street, over by the Elm Street Park, Spencer, those sort of locations. We want to track what's going on around our parks and around our school. Drainage, just a couple of quick updates there. We are working towards the Gowdy and the Nagel drains. On the sanitary, we did talk about the school program, so that was, I won't touch on that. We did conduct our emergency haul. This is something we call it emergency just because we have to, when we ask for permission from the ministry to do this, it's something that we know we cannot store enough sludge now on site. So it's something, even though it's emergency, it makes it sound like we're not aware, but we know the problem's there. We just don't have the capabilities. So at some point, we're either going to have to look at arranging some sludge hauling to a facility outside what we've got at the lagoons. The hope was that if we can secure the lagoons in the next year or 2 years, then we would just keep calling it emergency haulage, because it does save, the cost of it is considerably less than shipping it during the winter time to a facility to hold for us. So but I just want to touch on that. We do call it emergency, but we do know it's coming every year now. Water, the annual report has been completed and posted on our website and sent to the ministry. Aaron, who has moved on from Jacobs, so our manager for our water system is being covered by Rick Marsh right now, and the position is posted. Just a couple of other things. We are signed up for the Upper Thames Tree Program, which will take place in the fall. We also will do our seedling program, which is in the spring, and that is with the ABCA. The utility rate study and financial plan RFP basically has been released, and we will hopefully close at we are closing at May 1st, and more information will be brought to council on what we get back from that. The grant and development is moving forward. We are been scheduled to install a water meter, and a couple of units have been up. I don't know if you've been past it up in Granton. It's looking like it's moving along fairly well up there. So that's good news. The township and the Asabo Fields developer, we're just finishing off the townhouse block agreement. So the developer hopes to begin servicing the block 13, which is approximately right around the 70 units. They hope to start servicing right away and work through the summer to have that hopefully ready by the fall for building in that area. Site walkthrough is planned for next door at the 280 Main Street location. They are getting ready for occupancy, so there's a lot of activity being taken place next door. Julie and I met with Aqua to start off the CDM plan. CDM plan is an energy document that is required through regulation. And then we did go out to, pricing, and Aqua is we found Aqua was the lowest, and they're proceeding to put that report together for us, which will come back to council for a presentation on it. And finally, just to give council an information that working with Chief DeBrouwer from April 12th to 16th, there is some fire training taking place at the Public Workshop. And I just, it really doesn't affect Public Works in any way, but there will be different fire departments on scene each day doing some training to one side of the Public Works shop there. So I just want council aware of that. So that's an update.
Well, thank you for that great update, Jeff. I'll look to council. If they have any further questions for clarification on anything you commented on. Seeing that, the only comment I got on the Armadillo, I guess a concern that I think has happened in other municipalities, people take that sometimes as a ticketing device, and they're going to get a ticket, and vandalism or stealing it can be an issue. What are your thoughts on that? Or are you going to be strategically being able to put that ideally high enough locations or secure location? Or do you think, again, the idea of this is not to warn people, but that it's there, but it's almost like, do you make a note at all that, that this is for tracking speed, not ticketing device? Just a comment I wanted to make. It's a hard thing to guarantee or realize.
Yeah, I'll take it, and we'll take a look at one of the things that it does look it doesn't really stand out. It really, unless you really go to look for this, so we'll see how it turns out and maybe see if we get some feedback from the public on that. But I can assure it does not look like a camera in any way.
Yeah. Okay, good. No, thank you. And thank you for that report. I do have Jeff, did you have anything further to add? That's okay. Yeah, thank you. Recommended motion here that report number PW-09-2024 be received for information. Moved by Councillor Reagan, seconded by Councillor Westman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Parks and Recreation. I don't see anything for that. I don't think from staff. Economic Development. Anything to?
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. Just a quick couple of verbal updates. We recently submitted our Main Street grant application. Those were due March 31st. So hopefully we'll have a quick turnaround. And if we find out if we're successful or not on that. Reminder of the annual cleanup day, April 20th, once again. And I recently attended a Middlesex London Health Unit session on signage and their updated signage. So we will discuss with the new Parks and Recreation manager when they arrive about getting new signs up everywhere. So on our facilities. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to Lisa from council? Seeing none, thanks for that update. Councillor comments, is there any today? Start with
Step one
Councillor.
brief
Go
one,
ahead.
if I
Yep.
may, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just to what Lisa said about the annual cleanup day, I just want to remind people that they can volunteer for this, and they can get in touch with you, Lisa, so you can coordinate it. Is that how it's going to work? All right, just a reminder to the public, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Westman. Councillor comments?
Yes, and further to that, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, we will be having our e-waste collection at the Market Street Park. Scouts and Guides will be doing that work. So if anybody's got any electronics or items like that that they wish to recycle, it is a great fundraising opportunity for scouting and guiding in Lucan and Lucan Biddulph. And so if we can come and pick it up, if it's a heavy item, we will have people available to do that. So you can reach out to me through my township contact and we can make arrangements to pick it up for you.
Thank you. Any further councillor comments? I do not have any myself. Changes to budget, no motions, nothing, motion counts, nothing. Bylaws, I've got one recommended motion here on bylaws that if no one cares to speak to bylaws 15-2024 through 16-2024, inclusive of their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, or read a third time and passed. Mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Hodgins, seconded by Councillor Reagan. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Adjournment, resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 10:43. Moved by Councillor Reagan, seconded by Councillor Westman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Everyone have a good day. Thank you.